Imagine finally achieving complete, unbreakable inner peace.
Right.
Like your daily anxiety is just entirely gone.
Completely evaporated.
Exactly. Your stress is zero. But the cost of that total tranquility is that you must feel absolutely no pity if you, say, walk past a burning building.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. You hear people crying for help, but you just keep walking, totally unbothered, because your own emotional self-preservation basically demands it.
I mean, that is a genuinely terrifying thought for anyone raised in a society that values empathy above, well, almost everything else.
Right.
But that scenario really gets right to the heart of the psychological trade-off demanded by the framework we are unpacking today. We're looking at a blueprint for living that just actively torches the modern rulebook on how to be a good or productive or, caring person.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if you are someone who wants to understand the absolute extremes of human philosophy, but you don't want to drown in a sea of dense academic papers, you are in the perfect place. Today's deep dive is centered around a really fascinating, deeply provocative piece of translated source material from 2019. It's by an author named Sofeng, and it is titled Analyses of the Nature of Celestial Beings.
And it is an extraordinary document to read. I mean, the text blends these sweeping, ancient-feeling spiritual concepts with brutally specific behavioral instructions.
Oh, very specific.
Right. It basically serves as a literal how-to guide for shedding all worldly anxiety and transforming into what the author calls a modern-day celestial being. It outlines 8 specific natures or tenets required to achieve this state.
And to really understand what makes a celestial being tick, we have to start with how they interact with the physical world around them.
Yeah, the physical reality.
And the text hits you immediately with this demand for radical acceptance. Like, it claims a celestial being has to maintain the exact same peaceful mind, whether they are living in a luxury 5-star hotel or, a crumbling thatched house.
The contrasts it uses are totally designed to be jarring. It argues that your internal state should not fluctuate even 1 degree, whether you're dining on delicacies from the land and sea or eating. And this is a direct, quote, genetically modified, coarse bread and moldy leftovers.
I mean, the idea of smiling through a meal of moldy leftovers sounds less like enlightenment and more like just a delusion.
Right.
If I'm eating spoiled food, my brain is evolutionarily wired to be stressed about my survival. So how does someone actually decouple their internal peace from a reality that grim?
Well, it requires a complete restructuring of how you view ownership.
Okay.
The underlying logic here is that everything in the universe belongs to the greatest creator and to nature. And when the text mentions the greatest creator, it's not necessarily talking about like a man in the sky.
Right, right.
It's talking about the ultimate unyielding engine of reality. Because the universe owns everything, you actually possess nothing. You don't own your real estate, you don't own your reputation, and you don't even really own your physical body.
So if I follow that logic, if I truly believe I own absolutely nothing, then I can't be robbed.
Exactly.
Like, you can't steal what I don't claim as mine in the first place.
Yeah.
The text even points out that a celestial being has no fear of thieves, no fear of being insulted, and zero fear of death.
Precisely. Because, the anxiety you feel every day doesn't usually come from the things you have.
Real?
Yeah, it comes from the exhausting, constant vigilance required to guard the things you have.
Oh, wow.
If you surrender your claim to everything, that hypervigilance just vanishes. The text uses a really beautiful phrase. It says, life is like a bubble, and everything is as passing clouds.
It's almost like realizing you're in an endless free fall.
Okay, I like that.
The panic doesn't actually come from the falling itself, right? The panic comes from desperately trying to grab onto branches on the way down, scraping your hands, trying to stop the momentum.
Yes.
And this philosophy is basically saying, just pull your arms in and enjoy the wind.
That captures the psychological mechanism perfectly. What's fascinating here is that it's not about giving up. It's about realizing that if you truly believe the universe arranges everything justly, then fighting against your current reality, even if that reality is a moldy piece of bread, is a massive waste of caloric and emotional energy.
It's just friction.
Exactly. When blessings arrive, you enjoy them. When disasters hit, you bear them delightedly. You entirely shed the anxiety of loss.
Okay, but if you've let go of the branches, right, and you're just accepting this free fall, how do you actually make decisions when you hit the ground?
Good question.
Like, how do you organize a Tuesday? If I don't own my body or my future, how do I act?
That moves us into the behavioral instructions, which focus on having absolutely no fixed rules.
Right.
The text instructs a celestial being to conduct themselves limitlessly, acting flexibly according to whatever situations arise.
I found the wording here so fascinating. Because it introduces this idea of limitless behavior with these defiant, almost theatrical declarations.
Yeah, it does.
It says, I, granddaughter, or I, grandpa, can make myself as comfortable as I choose as long as it doesn't harm society or nature.
It's very bold.
There's a real swagger to it. It's an absolute rejection of dogma.
It is a complete rejection of anyone else's system. You hold no fixed precepts in your mind. And to explain how this works, the text uses a concept heavily tied to the Tao.
Okay, the Tao.
Yeah, the Tao represents the natural, unforced flow of the universe. The instruction is to never do anything while allowing all things to happen through the Tao.
Which sounds incredibly passive.
Yeah.
Like I'm just sitting there.
It sounds passive to us, sure, but the text illustrates it really practically. It says, if you meet water, you build a bridge. If you meet a mountain, you open a road.
Okay.
But the critical psychological pivot is this. If you meet neither water nor a mountain, you build neither.
Wow.
You do not invent problems to solve just to feel productive. You don't pull up seedlings in the spring because you're impatient for them to grow.
You don't optimize the seedling, which goes against every single fiber of our modern hustle culture.
Every fiber.
Like, if I am supposed to have no plans, no wishes, and no pursuits, how do I achieve anything?
Wow.
The text literally says, if you are destined to be a shepherd, then never envy princes, marquises, generals, or ministers. And I read that and immediately thought about the American dream, the idea of relentless self-improvement, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. This philosophy treats ambition like it's a disease.
Because, in this framework, ambition is the disease.
Wow.
The text targets a concept called active dharma. Now, in many Eastern philosophies, dharma refers to your duty or your path.
Right.
But active dharma is when your ego steps in and tries to force a specific outcome that isn't naturally occurring.
Ah.
The text views all active dharma, every deliberate ego-driven pursuit of wealth or status or legacy, as an illusion. It's a bubble.
So if my reality is that I am a shepherd, but I spend my entire life agonizing over the fact that I am not a prince, that gap between my reality and my ego's demand is where all my misery lives.
Exactly.
The friction of wanting to be somewhere else is what exhausts me, not the actual shepherding.
That is the exact mechanism of suffering the text is trying to dismantle. If you surrender your life to the management of the Tao, you trust the current of the river.
Right.
State affairs, family affairs, the macro cycles of cause and effect. The author explicitly states these are neither my worries nor any of my business.
That is wild.
You stop trying to force the universe to bend to your specific ambitions. You drink your tea, you bask in the sun, and you handle only what is immediately placed in front of you.
I mean, I can entirely see how abandoning the relentless grind for a promotion would relieve stress.
Sure.
It's totally liberating to think about just doing the task in front of me without optimizing my 10-year plan. But here is where the framework hits a massive speed bump for me.
Okay, let's hear it.
It is one thing to detach from your career,
Oh.
right? It's like playing a jazz improvisation instead of reading sheet music.
Huh.
But it is entirely different when we introduce other human beings into this freefall.
Yes.
How does a celestial being handle relationships without becoming an isolated hermit?
Well, this is where the text introduces a deeply paradoxical requirement. It demands that a celestial being is amorous everywhere, but never attaching importance to affection.
Right. It says you must be merciful in your words and actions. You never reach an impasse with people. You are supposed to project warmth, but you are strictly forbidden from actually caring deeply.
The caveat is incredibly strict. You cannot fall into affection. You are warned against having too much affection for any specific person, or an organization, a political party, a country, or even a religion.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. How does that actually work in practice?
It's tough to picture.
How do you project genuine warmth without forming a real attachment? The only way I can really visualize it is like surface tension on a pond.
Oh, I like this.
Yeah, celestial being is like one of those water strider insects. They interact with the water, they glide across it smoothly. They might even look like they're dancing with the ripples. But the absolute rule of their survival is that they can never break the surface tension. Because the second they let themselves sink into the water, into deep, binding affection for one specific drop of that pond, they drown.
The surface tension analogy is brilliant because it highlights the physics of what Shifeng is arguing. Deep affection operates like a heavyweight.
Yeah.
If you tie yourself deeply to your spouse or your children or your nation, you become anchored to their fates, their pains, and their fluctuations. You lose your limitless nature.
Because suddenly I have something I am desperate to protect. I'm back to guarding the treasure.
Exactly. And the source states flatly that this specific type of binding affection makes it impossible for you to be natural and unrestrained, which ultimately makes it impossible for you to become immortal or fully enlightened.
Wow.
The affection a celestial being displays must be universal and diffuse. It is the warmth of the sun shining on a whole forest, not a laser beam focused intensely on one single tree.
Universal warmth, but zero individual depth. Which brings us to the hardest, most jarring part of this entire deep dive. Because if you maintain that surface tension and you refuse to sink into the struggles of individual people, it leads directly to the text's absolute instruction to feel no mercy and no pity.
Yeah, it is undeniably the most challenging hurdle for a modern reader. The text demands that you remain natural and unrestrained by entirely excising pity from your emotional vocabulary.
And it grounds this demand in the brutality of nature.
Oh.
It lists these vivid, violent examples: cats catching mice, eagles scooping up rabbits, a lion tearing apart an antelope, a mantis attacking a cicada.
It's just nature happening.
Right. The author acknowledges that this cruelty exists, but then bluntly asks the reader, can you do anything to stop it? Do you have a better arrangement than nature?
Because the answer is obviously no. The text argues that feeling pity is almost an arrogant waste of energy.
Arrogant, wow.
It's an emotional rebellion against the fundamental arrangement of reality. But the framework doesn't stop with the animal kingdom. It extends this zero-pity philosophy directly into the realm of human suffering.
And this is where my brain just short-circuited. The text brings up an organization called Lifechanyuan. Now, in the context of this source material, Lifechanyuan is presented as a community that has successfully created a paradise mode for living essentially a perfect, enlightened path.
Right.
But the text says if people refuse to listen to this path, if they reject the paradise mode, then a celestial being should absolutely never waste their energy on mercy or cry over the suffering of the world. And just to be super clear to you listening, we are naturally not taking any sides or endorsing this worldview. We are impartially unpacking what the source material actually claims.
Absolutely. We are just looking at the framework.
Mm.
And the instruction is unflinching. It says, look at the suffering in the world. People are crying and shouting, but never waste your energy on mercy or pity.
If I see a lion eating an antelope, my instinct is horror, but I understand it's the food chain. But if I walk past a person crying and shouting in the street, and I intentionally suppress my urge to help them because it might, anchor me, that sounds less like a celestial being and more like a cynic walking past a burning building.
Yeah.
If I don't feel bad for a crying person, what separates me from a machine?
This raises an important question. That friction you are feeling is the clash between modern morality and total spiritual detachment. We have to look at the psychological mechanics the text is utilizing.
Okay.
The author isn't advocating for cruelty. The text explicitly warns against gloating over the misfortunes of others. What it is arguing against is the futile drain of emotional codependence.
Meaning, my suffering doesn't cure their suffering.
Exactly. The text defines having no pity as simply not being sad. It is a mathematical view of emotional energy.
Oh, interesting.
If someone is suffering and you allow yourself to be consumed by grief over their situation, a situation you are incapable of changing, you haven't reduced the suffering in the world. You have merely doubled it by adding your own pain to the equation.
You were just bleeding out right next to them.
Yes. It defines being unrestrained as not crying from one's grievances, and crucially, never delaying when you should surrender someone or something.
Wow.
It even applies this to your social circle. The text strongly advises walking only with positive, optimistic, open-minded people. It strictly forbids entangling yourself with people who whine, fuss, complain, or want to bind you with their emotional crises.
So you ruthlessly cut out the energy vampires. You refuse to let anyone else's inability to accept reality drag you out of your peaceful free fall.
It is a radical boundary. Your emotional sovereignty is absolute.
Okay, let's step back for a second and look at the profile we've just built.
Let's do it.
Because if you combine all these traits, a celestial being sounds absolutely terrifying to be around. We are talking about someone who happily eats moldy bread, has completely abandoned all personal ambition, treats your friendship with the emotional depth of a water strider, and will watch you cry over a tragedy without shedding a single tear.
It's an intense list.
You would expect this person to be a cold, silent statue sitting on a mountaintop somewhere, completely alienated from humanity.
You would. But the final nature outlined in the text introduces a brilliant, Totally counterintuitive twist. It dictates how a celestial being must actually behave in a social setting.
Right.
And surprisingly, they are required to be incredibly charming and fun.
I genuinely couldn't believe this part. The text dictates that they must behave with an elegant demeanor. They are required to talk cheerfully, to be humorous.
Yeah, cracking jokes.
It says they should joke and chat freely, making the people around them laugh heartily. The author describes their presence as making people feel like they are bathing in sunshine, or as if spring suddenly arrived in one night.
It creates a fascinating duality. They feel no deep attachment to you, but they are an absolute delight to be around.
Yeah.
However, this elegant demeanor isn't just about being a good conversationalist or enjoying poetry and chess. The final principle requires intense physical self-sufficiency.
Right. The author references another related text called The 64 Details of Gestating the Behavior and Elegant Demeanor of Celestial Beings.
That's right.
And it makes it clear that to pull off this carefree existence, you must possess the high-level intelligence and physical ability to solve your own problems. You have to be able to handle your own eating, clothing, housing, transportation, sickness, and old age.
This is the anchor that keeps the entire philosophy from just floating away into delusion. True freedom, in Suifeng's framework, is supported entirely by competence.
Wow.
You cannot be spiritually unfettered if you are constantly begging other people to pay your rent or fix your car. Your lack of emotional attachment is only valid if it is supported by your total ability to survive reality without burdening others.
So what does this all mean if we synthesize all of this? A celestial being is essentially the ultimate high-vibes, low-maintenance dinner guest because they require absolutely nothing from you. No money, no validation, no pity, no shared outrage. Their joy is completely unburdened. They won't argue with your worldview. They'll make you laugh. They will bring the energy of a sudden spring day. But the exact moment you try to trauma dump on them, or the moment you demand they suffer alongside you, they will simply glide away across the surface of the pond.
It is a profound level of autonomy. It is spiritual detachment achieved through total physical and emotional self-reliance.
For you listening right now, absorbing all of these intense concepts, Schiffing's blueprint offers a really fascinating and fiercely extreme antidote to the overwhelm of modern life. The prescription for our daily exhaustion isn't a new morning routine or a better planner.
No, it's not.
It is the radical acceptance of whatever the universe throws at us. It is the total abandonment of the ego-driven ambitions that keep us constantly dissatisfied. And it is the deliberate severing of the deep codependent emotional attachments that cause us to agonize over things we simply cannot control.
And realistically, trying to adopt all 8 of these principles overnight would break most people.
Oh, completely.
Our society just isn't built for it. But the underlying mechanics hold incredible value. Simply practicing the idea of acting flexibly according to situations, choosing not to build a bridge when there is no water, can immediately reduce the friction in your day.
Right.
You don't have to start eating spoiled food to benefit from letting go of your frantic need to control the universe.
You can just pull your arms in and enjoy the free fall for a minute.
Exactly.
But before we wrap up, we always want to leave you with a final, provocative thought. Something for you to ponder on your own that exposes the friction within the source material itself.
Right, the contradictions.
Throughout this deep dive, we've established that the text demands a celestial being accept whatever fate brings without argument. Everything, from the lion tearing apart the antelope, to someone losing their home, to people outright rejecting the path to paradise, is just the natural, predetermined arrangement of the Tao. We are told to view all human action as an illusion.
Yes, that is the core premise.
Yet, buried in the text, there is a fascinating loophole. It explicitly states that while you shouldn't argue over subjective things like beauty or ugliness, a celestial being is permitted to discuss justice and wickedness. So here is the question for you to ponder. If absolutely everything that happens is just the unyielding current of the Tao, and if feeling pity for suffering is a violation of nature's arrangement, then what exactly is wickedness to a celestial being?
Right.
How can an action be wicked if it was destined to happen? And how can justice possibly exist in a philosophical framework that has completely burned the rule book?
It is a massive philosophical contradiction. I mean, if there are no rules, what exactly is justice restoring?
It really makes you wonder if it's possible to ever truly escape the human need to categorize right from wrong, even when you're gliding perfectly across the surface of the water.
It's a great question.
Whether you find the idea of this radical detachment terrifying or incredibly liberating,
it undeniably forces you to re-examine the heavy backpack of expectations you carry around every single day. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the nature of celestial beings. Keep questioning the rules, keep exploring the frameworks, and we will catch you next time.